Supreme Commander Zixtal's tentacles rippled with satisfaction as he studied the holographic display of humanity's outer colony. New Montana. Such a primitive name for such an insignificant world. The planet's single research station barely registered on his flagship's sensors, its defensive capabilities appearing laughably obsolete compared to the Mraxian Empire's mighty fleet. Another simple conquest, he chittered to his bridge crew. Prepare the standard intimidation broadcast. Let's make this quick. I want to be back in Imperial space for the Molting Festival. The Mraxian fleet hung in high orbit, their obsidian ships arranged in the Empire's traditional triangle of dominance formation. 17 successful conquests had taught them efficiency. First, the show of force. Then, the broadcast. Finally, the inevitable surrender. It was almost boring in its predictability. Dr. Jessica Brooks stood at her station's observation window, a cup of coffee cooling forgotten in her hand, as she watched the alien ships arrange themselves overhead. Her quantum communications array hummed behind her, processing data at rates that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. To anyone watching, including the Mraxians' sophisticated sensor arrays, it looked like a simple subspace relay. That was exactly how she wanted it to appear. "How's our ghost protocol holding up, ARIA?" she asked the station's eye. "Quantum camouflage is at 99.8% efficiency, Dr. Brooks. They're seeing exactly what we want them to see." The AI's voice held a note of pride. "The Empire's scans are bouncing off our outer shell perfectly. As far as they can tell, we're just a handful of humans huddled around a fusion reactor that's one hiccup away from failure." Jessica smiled, taking a sip of her coffee. "Perfect. And the rest of the fleet? Captain Chen's ships are maintaining position in the quantum fold. The Mraxians haven't detected a thing." Araya paused. "Though I should note that Lieutenant Rodriguez is complaining about quantum space making her nauseous again. Tell her to take a Dramamine," Jessica chuckled. "And remind her that hiding an entire defense fleet in a pocket of folded spacetime is worth a little motion sickness." The quantum communications array pinged, indicating an incoming transmission. The Mraxians were right on schedule. "Incoming broadcast," Dr. Araya announced. "Standard Imperial frequency. Their encryption is, honestly, it's kind of cute. Want me to put it through?" "Let's hear what the conquering heroes have to say." Jessica settled into her command chair, positioning herself carefully. First impressions mattered, especially when you were about to turn an Empire's worldview upside down. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Supreme Commander Zixtal in all his tentacled glory. His translator produced what was probably meant to be an intimidating boom. "Insignificant human colony, you have been blessed by the attention of the Mraxian Empire. Your technology is inferior. Your defenses are inadequate. Your surrender is inevitable. Prepare for immediate." Jessica held up her hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, Supreme Commander, but I have to stop you there. Did you just call my quantum communication array inferior?" She took another sip of coffee, letting her amusement show. "That's adorable." Zixtal's tentacles writhed in confusion. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. "You dare interrupt the Imperial?" Yes, the Imperial whatever. Here's the thing." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes twinkling. "You're about to have a very interesting day, Supreme Commander. See, while you were busy arranging your ships in that impressive triangle up there, I've been doing some calculations. Would you like to know the really funny part about quantum communications?" She pressed a button on her console. Suddenly, the space around her station flickered, just for a moment. It was enough to make Zixtal's compound eyes widen. "The really funny part," Jessica continued, enjoying herself immensely, "is that they work incredibly well for hiding things. Big things. Like, say, an entire defense fleet." As if on cue, the quantum fold began to collapse, revealing the truth about New Montana's defenses. And for the first time, In 3 centuries of conquest, a Mraxian Supreme Commander learned what it felt like to be on the wrong end of a surprise. Supreme Commander Zixtal's tentacles coiled tightly around his command chair as the human fleet materialized from seemingly nowhere. Where moments ago his sensors had detected a single research station, now dozens of sleek vessels hung in formation, their designs unlike anything in the Imperial database. Impossible, his science officer Krelax whispered, all 4 eyes fixed on the readings. They're energy signatures. They're there and not there at the same time. It defies physical law. Oh, it's entirely possible. Dr. Brooks's voice came through their comm system, clear as crystal despite the Empire's best encryption. We just had to think a little differently about space-time. You know how a quantum particle can be in 2 places at once. Turns out you can scale that up if you're either brave or stupid enough. We went with both. The Supreme Commander's composure cracked. You dare mock the Empire. We have conquered 17 systems. Our technology is superior. Our might is absolute. 17 systems. Jessica's laughter echoed across every frequency. That's cute. Let me share something with you. She tapped a few commands into her console. Araya, show them what humanity does when faced with superior forces. The Mraxian command screen suddenly filled with images, ancient battles, modern conflicts, and everything in between. Persian armies facing 300 Spartans. The American Revolution. The Battle of Britain. The Mars colony uprising. Victory after victory against overwhelming odds. See, here's the thing about humans, Jessica continued, her voice taking on a teacher's patient tone. We've been the underdog so many times that we've gotten really, really good at it. It's kind of our specialty. Zixtal's tactical officer interrupted, his voice shaking. Supreme Commander, they're ships. They're moving in patterns our combat AI can't predict. It's like they're deliberately breaking every rule of space combat. That's because we are, Jessica confirmed cheerfully. You know what humans did before we went to space. We played games. Lots and lots of games. Video games, specifically. Do you have any idea how many hours of space combat simulation the average human pilot has logged before they ever touch a real ship? The human vessels began an intricate dance through space, weaving patterns that made the Mraxian targeting systems throw up error messages. Each ship moved independently yet in perfect coordination, like a swarm of insects that had memorized an impossible valet. Your combat AI can't predict us because we're not trying to be efficient, Jessica explained. We're not trying to be logical. We're doing what works, not what makes sense. Half of these maneuvers came from teenagers playing Stellar Warfare AX in their basements. Zixtal's rage finally boiled over. Enough. All ships, open fire. Show these primitives the true might of the Empire. The order went out. Nothing happened. Oh, right. Jessica's voice took on a note of false surprise. I should probably mention. While I've been talking, AI has been making friends with your ship computers. Turns out quantum communications are really good for that too. Would you like to see something really interesting? Every screen in the Mraxian fleet suddenly began playing what appeared to be an ancient Earth entertainment video. A massive spacecraft hung over a city preparing to fire its main weapon. Then a much smaller craft flew into view, and a human voice declared, "Welcome to Earth." That's from Independence Day, Jessica explained. 1996 classic. We've been imagining beating alien empires in battle for longer than your species has been in space. Now we could do this the hard way. The human fleet shifted, weapons ports opening in perfect synchronization. Or we could have a civilized conversation about why assuming technological superiority might not be your best move right now. For the first time in his career, Supreme Commander Zixtal found himself completely at a loss for words. The humans had taken everything he knew about warfare, about conquest, about the natural order of civilization itself, and turned it into a joke. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any weapon they could have pointed at his fleet. Target lock failed. Recalibrating. Failed. Secondary targeting array. Failed. Quantum trace detection. Failed. The reports cascaded across the Mraxian bridge as their gunners frantically tried to get a solid fix on the human vessels. Each time they thought they had a target, the ships seemed to shift slightly, not moving, exactly, but becoming somehow less there. Supreme Commander Zixtal's facial tentacles had turned an interesting shade of pale green. "Explain," he demanded of his science officer. It's as if Krelax adjusted his instruments again, as if they're partially existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. The moment we focus on one state, they shift to another. It's like trying to grab smoke with your tentacles. Dr. Jessica Brooks's voice cut through their confusion. "You know what humanity's greatest advantage is. We're really, really good at learning from our mistakes, and our biggest mistake historically was trying to out-tank the tank." Her image appeared on their screens, casually sipping from a steaming mug. "See, everyone else we've encountered approaches space combat the same way. Bigger ships, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. But we ask ourselves, why try to survive a hit when you can simply not be there when it lands?" As if to demonstrate, one of her ships seemed to blur and split into 5 possible positions before resolving back into a single vessel in a completely different location than any of the projections had suggested. "Quantum uncertainty on a macro scale," she continued. "Turns out Schrödinger's cat had the right idea. We're simultaneously here and not here until you try to observe us. And even then," she grinned, "well, let's just say we've gotten very good at disappointing observers." Zixtal slammed a tentacle against his command console. "This is impossible. No civilization has achieved macro-quantum manipulation. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical using conventional physics." "Yes," Jessica agreed. "Good thing we stopped thinking conventionally." "Araya, show them what happens when you let physicists get creative with quantum mechanics." The space around the human fleet suddenly rippled. For a brief moment, the Mraxians' sensors detected energy readings that went off their scales, then dropped to nothing, then registered as negative energy, which shouldn't even have been possible. "We call it the Ghost Protocol," Jessica explained. "Part quantum superposition, part probability manipulation, and part let's see what happens if we do something everyone says is impossible. Would you like to see what else we've come up with while everyone thought we were just a primitive colony?" Before Zixtal could respond, proximity alarms blared across his fleet. Somehow, human ships had appeared inside their formation, ships that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. "That's the funny thing about quantum tunneling." Jessica's voice held a note of pure scientific joy. "Theoretically, any particle has a non-zero probability of being anywhere in the universe. Scale that up with enough processing power and a complete disregard for what people say you can't do. All ships, evasive action," Zixtal ordered. But as his fleet tried to scatter, they found themselves responding to threats that appeared and disappeared faster than their targeting computers could process. "We're not actually trying to destroy your ships," Jessica noted conversationally. "This is just a demonstration. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the biggest guns. It's the one who's spent centuries being told that's impossible and decided to take it as a challenge." On the Mraxian flagship's bridge, Science Officer Krelax turned to his commander, all 4 eyes wide with realization. "Sir, I don't think they built their technology to fight wars. They built it because someone told them they couldn't." "Bingo." Jessica's grin widened. "Now shall we discuss terms, or would you like another physics lesson? I've got some fascinating theories about using quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication that would absolutely ruin your whole day." For the first time in the history of the Mraxian Empire, a supreme commander found himself considering the possibility that superior firepower might not be enough. Not against an enemy who treated the laws of physics as polite suggestions. Battle stations. Supreme Commander Zixtal's order echoed across the Mraxian fleet. "If these humans want to play games, we'll show them how the Empire handles insurgents." The massive Imperial dreadnoughts began their attack pattern, a formation perfected over centuries of conquest. It was beautiful in its precision, each ship moving in perfect synchronization, their combined firepower designed to overwhelm any defense. Dr. Jessica Brooks watched the display from her command center, a slight smile playing across her face. "Araya, what does that formation remind you of?" "Analyzing." The AI paused. "It appears to match the classic arrow formation from Stellar Command 3, circa 2142. Specifically, the notorious unbeatable Level 47. Jessica's smile widened. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, remember that game night last month?" "You mean when we spent 6 hours figuring out how to beat that level?" Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Already plotting the counter pattern, Doctor. Ghost Squadron, follow my lead." The human fleet suddenly fractured into smaller units, each moving in what appeared to be complete chaos. To the Mraxian tactical officers, it looked like their opponents had lost all military discipline. Ships spun and weaved in seemingly random patterns, some even appearing to fly backward through their own weapon trails. Supreme Commander Krelax reported, confusion evident in his voice. "Their formations, they make no tactical sense. They're violating every principle of space combat." "That's because we're not fighting a war," Jessica's voice cut in. "We're speedrunning a video game. Rodriguez, show them that trick you figured out with the quantum wake surfing." 3 human corvettes suddenly accelerated to what should have been suicidal speeds, their quantum drives leaving trails of disturbed spacetime. Instead of firing, they wove through the Mraxian formation, their wakes creating a complex interference pattern that played havoc with the Imperial ship's sensors. "Impossible." Zixtal watched as his perfectly coordinated attack dissolved into confusion. No pilot could survive those G-forces. "They can when they're riding quantum probability waves," Jessica explained. "The ships are actually in multiple positions at once, and the pilots are just choosing which possibility to collapse into. Think of it as less flying and more, choosing which reality you prefer." The battle devolved further as the human ships demonstrated maneuvers that seemed to defy physics itself. A cruiser would appear to take a direct hit, only to glitch back to a position it had occupied seconds before. Smaller craft phased through solid matter, treating the Empire's finest armor as mere suggestions. "You know what your Empire's biggest weakness is?" Jessica asked conversationally, as another Mraxian dreadnought found itself tied in knots trying to track targets that existed in quantum superposition. "You've only ever fought enemies that play by the rules. But humans, we grew up on games where the first thing you do is look for exploits in the system." To demonstrate her point, a squadron of human fighters executed a maneuver that, according to every known law of physics, should have torn them apart. Instead, they emerged unscathed, their quantum drives leaving trails of possibility that reflected the Mraxians' own weapon fire back at them. "That one's from Galactic Warfare VI, Jessica noted proudly. "Rodriguez holds the sector record for that move, though I still say using quantum uncertainty to multiply your effective firepower should count as cheating." "It's not cheating, Doc." Rodriguez's laugh carried over the comm. "It's creative use of game mechanics." On the Mraxian flagship's bridge, a junior tactical officer spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, I think they're treating our battle formations like a puzzle to be solved." Zixtal watched as another of his ships fell into confusion, its crew unable to cope with enemies that treated the fundamental laws of reality as optional game rules. The humans weren't just fighting, they were having fun. And somehow, that was the most terrifying realization of all. How do you defeat an enemy that treats your most serious assault as an entertaining challenge? "Your move, Supreme Commander." Jessica's voice held a note of genuine amusement. "Though I should warn you, Rodriguez has been wanting to try out this really crazy quantum tunneling maneuver she saw in a speedrun video." "Project Mockingbird is ready, Dr. Brooks." Araya's voice held an unusual note of anticipation, though I still think starting with cat videos might be a bit much. Jessica leaned back in her command chair, surveying the aftermath of their recent skirmish. The Mraxian fleet hung in disarray, their perfect formation shattered by quantum warfare they couldn't comprehend. Sometimes the silliest weapons are the most effective. Start the broadcast. Across the Mraxian fleet, communication officers noticed an odd signal penetrating their encrypted channels. Before they could react, every screen began displaying something unprecedented. A kitten trying to catch a laser pointer dot. What is this nonsense? Supreme Commander Zixtal demanded, tentacles writhing in confusion. Then the cat video shifted to something else. Clips of Earth entertainment spanning centuries. Movies, music videos, social media highlights, viral memes, all carefully selected and sequenced. You see, Supreme Commander, Jessica's voice cut through the cascade of media. While you were busy watching our ships, we were mapping your entire communication network. Quantum entanglement makes for amazing bandwidth. On a Mraxian supply ship, a young maintenance worker watched in fascination as humans danced to something called rock music. In the medical bay, staff gathered around a screen showing scenes from medical dramas, their eyes widening at the concept of doctors who questioned authority. "Sir," Krelax reported, panic in his voice, the lower decks. They're requesting more of these transmissions, especially something called TikTok challenges. It gets better, Jessica continued cheerfully. Show them the good stuff. The transmissions shifted. Now they showed crowds protesting against oppression, students standing up to tanks, workers organizing for better conditions, revolutions succeeding through peaceful resistance. Each clip carefully chosen to resonate with the Mraxian Empire's strictly controlled underclass. "Stop this at once," Zixtal commanded, but his own communication officers were too engrossed in watching a documentary about Earth's labor movements to respond. "Here's something fascinating about information," Jessica explained, as if giving a lecture. "Once it's out there, you can't really control it. You can try, but ideas are quantum too. They exist in superposition, everywhere and nowhere, until someone observes them, and then they collapse into reality." Reports began flooding in from across the fleet. Mraxian crew members were sharing the human broadcasts, adding their own commentary, creating memes with their own cultural references. A group of engine workers had already adapted "We will rock you" into a work chant. "Sir," a junior officer interrupted, "the maintenance crew is demanding something called a coffee break. And the medical staff, they're talking about patient rights." Jessica's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "You know what's really infectious? Hope. The idea that things could be different. That hierarchy isn't destiny. That even the smallest voice deserves to be heard." The transmissions continued evolving. Earth's greatest speeches about freedom and dignity played alongside scenes from revolutions, both real and fictional. Philosophy lectures debating the nature of authority mixed with clips from anti-authoritarian movies. Project Mockingbird isn't a weapon, Jessica explained to the increasingly distraught Supreme Commander. It's an invitation to imagine something different. And once people start imagining, she didn't need to finish the thought. Already, commissioned officers were reporting unusual behaviors throughout the fleet. Lower-caste workers were making eye contact with their superiors. Medical orderlies were suggesting treatment alternatives. Engine crews were discussing efficiency improvements that violated traditional hierarchies. "You can't fight an idea with weapons, Supreme Commander." Jessica's voice was almost gentle now. "Especially not ideas about freedom, dignity, and self-determination. Those are quantum concepts. They exist in all possible states until someone collapses them into reality through action." Zixtal watched helplessly as his perfectly ordered command structure began dissolving, infected by something more potent than any virus. "Hope. Your move," Jessica concluded. "Though I should warn you, I haven't even shown them the cat memes yet." The revolution began with a rhythm. On the lower engineering deck of the Mraxian flagship, a maintenance worker tapped her wrench against a coolant pipe. Thump, thump, clap. Another worker joined in. Thump, thump, clap. then another, and another, until the entire deck thundered with the beat of Queen's "We Will Rock You," a song that had arrived just hours ago in Dr. Brooks's transmission. "Sir," Krelax reported, his voice trembling. "It's spreading through the entire fleet. They're using maintenance channels to share what they're calling playlists." Supreme Commander Zixtal watched his security feeds in horror. Throughout his ships, lowercase Meraxians were gathering in maintenance bays and cargo holds, moving in synchronized patterns they called dancing. But there was something else hidden in those movements, something that made his tactical training scream warnings. They're using the dances to communicate, he realized too late. The movements, they're a code. Jessica's voice cut in, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Fascinating thing about human dance moves, they make excellent encryption keys. Each gesture can represent multiple meanings depending on context. It's like quantum encryption, but with more hip-hop. Across the fleet, seemingly innocent dance gatherings were becoming something more. Workers coordinated shift changes through choreographed routines. Medical staff passed information via synchronized movements during breaks. Even the kitchen staff had developed a whole language of gestures disguised as food preparation rhythms. "You want to know the really clever part?" Jessica continued, her voice carrying that teacher's tone that Zixtal had come to dread. "We didn't plan any of this. We just provided the music. Your people figured out the rest on their own." A new report flashed across Zixtal's screen. On 3 different supply ships, crews had organized what they called open mic nights, gatherings where Meraxians took turns speaking freely about their experiences. The concept of voluntary public speaking was so alien to imperial culture that security protocols had no way to classify it as rebellion. "Sir," a junior officer burst onto the bridge. "The maintenance crews, they're singing." The sound carried through the ship's corridors. A Meraxian adaptation of "Do You Hear the People Sing?" from Les Miserables. The translation was rough, but the sentiment was unmistakable. "It's amazing how quickly people adapt Earth culture to their own needs," Jessica observed. "Araya, how many versions of that song are currently spreading through the fleet?" 17 distinct variations, the AI reported. The engine crew's version is particularly creative. They've incorporated the sound of plasma injectors into the rhythm section. Zixtal slammed his tentacles against his command console. "This is absurd. The Empire cannot be brought down by music." "Oh, the music is just the carrier wave," Jessica explained cheerfully. "The real transmission is the idea that people can gather, create, and express themselves freely. Once that takes hold," she let the thought hang. On the security feeds, Zixtal watched as decades of rigid social conditioning unraveled. Lowercase workers were organizing discussion groups about Earth entertainment. Medical staff had started a debate club focused on bioethics. Even his own bridge crew was humming Earth melodies under their breath. "Your empire made a crucial mistake," Jessica's voice softened. "You thought culture was something to be controlled. We learned long ago that culture is quantum. It exists in endless superpositions of possibility until people interact with it. Try to pin it down, and you change it. Try to control it, and it slips through your fingers." A new alert flashed. Ships across the fleet were reporting unauthorized gatherings in recreation areas. But how do you stop a rebellion when the weapons are songs, the ammunition is ideas, and the battlefield is culture itself? "Face it, Supreme Commander," Jessica concluded, "you've already lost. Not to our quantum ships or our advanced technology, but to something far more powerful, the human drive to connect, create, and change." In the corridors of his flagship, the singing grew louder. And for the first time in his career, Supreme Commander Zixtal found himself tapping his tentacle in time with the rhythm of revolution. "Supreme Commander," Dr. Jessica Brooks's transmission cut through the chaos of the Meraxian fleet's cultural upheaval. "I'd like to play a game." A holographic chessboard materialized between them, its pieces gleaming in the starlight. The broadcast reached every screen across both fleets, drawing an audience of billions as it was relayed across Imperial space. Chess. Zixtal's tentacles writhed in confusion. You've brought my empire to the brink of collapse, and now you want to play a game. Not just any game, Jessica replied, moving a white pawn forward. The oldest human strategy simulation still in active use. 4,000 years of human military thinking, distilled into 64 squares. The Supreme Commander's tactical training kicked in. He recognized a challenge when he saw one. And what are the stakes? Simple. If you win, we surrender. If I win, the Empire reforms. Jessica's eyes sparkled. Though I should warn you, I learned to play from an AI that learned from watching cat videos. Zixtal moved his first piece. He had commanded fleets, conquered systems. Surely a simple board game wouldn't be his undoing. 3 moves later, he realized his mistake. Jessica's strategy seemed insane. She sacrificed powerful pieces for apparently no gain, left her king exposed, and ignored obvious threats. Yet somehow, each seemingly random move was part of a deeper pattern that only became clear dozens of steps later. Fascinating thing about chess. She commented as her knight made an unexpected move. It's like quantum mechanics. Every move creates multiple possible futures. The trick isn't to pick the best one. It's to make your opponent collapse the quantum state in exactly the way you want. The game drew on. Across the fleet, Raxians of all castes gathered around screens, watching their supreme commander face an opponent who seemed to be playing an entirely different game than the one on the board. "Sir," Krelax whispered, her strategy. "It's like the way they fought our ships. Chaos with a purpose. Notice how she's not trying to win through superior force." Jessica asked the audience as much as her opponent. "Just like we didn't try to beat your ships with bigger guns, sometimes the strongest position is the one that looks weakest, until it's too late." Zixtal's moves became more desperate as he realized the trap he was in. Each seemingly perfect attack position turned out to be exactly where Jessica wanted his pieces. His carefully planned strategies fell apart against moves that violated every principle of tactical logic, yet worked perfectly. "You're not playing to win," he realized suddenly. "You're playing to teach." "Now you're getting it," Jessica smiled. "Every move I've made tells a story. About how strength isn't always about force. About how apparent chaos can hide perfect order. About how sometimes the best way to win is to change the nature of victory itself." The game reached its climax. Jessica's scattered pieces suddenly revealed their true purpose, not to win by taking the king, but to create a position where every possible move led to the same outcome. "Checkmate in 5 moves," she announced. "But more importantly, look at your pieces. Look at how they've changed position. How they've learned to work together in ways your rigid hierarchy never allowed." Zixtal stared at the board. His pieces had indeed transformed their arrangement, forced by Jessica's seemingly random moves into configurations that violated traditional strategic doctrine, yet were undeniably more effective. "Just like your empire," Jessica continued softly. "Sometimes you have to break formation to become stronger. Sometimes the best victory isn't defeating your opponent. It's showing them a better way to play the game." The Supreme Commander looked at his fleet's screens. Every Mraxian watching had seen it, had understood the lesson embedded in every move, had witnessed their Supreme Military Commander learn, adapt, and grow. "Your move, Supreme Commander," Jessica said, "though we both know there's only one left that makes sense." Zixtal reached out with one tentacle and tipped over his king. Not in defeat, but in recognition of a truth his empire had needed to learn. Sometimes the greatest victory is choosing to play a different game entirely. 1 year after the chess match that changed an empire, Dr. Jessica Brooks stood on the observation deck of New Montana Station, watching ships arrive for the first intergalactic cultural exchange festival. The sight still made her smile. Mraxian vessels dancing through space in quantum probability waves they'd once considered impossible, their crews having embraced both human technology and culture in ways she'd never anticipated. Dr. Aria's voice carried a note of amusement. Former Supreme Commander Zixtal's ship is requesting docking clearance. He's bringing his jazz fusion band. Jessica laughed. Now there's a sentence I never thought I'd hear. Grant them priority docking. I want to hear how they've incorporated quantum harmonics into their brass section. The station had been transformed for the festival. Every corridor hummed with multiple layers of possibility, quantum state decorations shifting between cultural displays from a dozen species. In the main auditorium, a Mraxian dance troupe practiced their interpretation of Swan Lake, their tentacles moving through superposition states to create effects that defied traditional choreography. Remember when they thought quantum mechanics couldn't apply to macro systems? Jessica mused to Aria as she walked through the station. Now they're using it to create art that exists in multiple states simultaneously until it's observed. Their quantum ballet is giving physics professors headaches. She passed the station's new quantum computing center, where former Imperial scientists worked alongside human programmers, combining rigid Mraxian logic with human creativity to push the boundaries of what was possible. On one screen, she noticed they were using quantum entanglement to create what appeared to be a multiplayer version of Pong that existed in all possible states until someone scored. Dr. Brooks, Krelax, the former science officer, hurried up to her. All four of his eyes were bright with excitement. You have to see what the cultural fusion team has created. We've combined human musical theory with quantum probability matrices to create symphonies that play differently for each observer. Lead the way, Jessica grinned. The former Imperial officer had become one of the most enthusiastic advocates for cultural exchange, particularly after discovering human jazz and its similarities to quantum uncertainty principles. The festival's main plaza was a riot of activity. Former Imperial citizens mingled freely across caste lines, sharing stories, art, and ideas. A group of maintenance workers had set up what they called a quantum poetry slam, where verses existed in multiple potential forms until spoken aloud. Nearby, human and Mraxian chefs collaborated on cuisine that somehow occupied multiple flavor states simultaneously. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came over her comm. You've got to see what the kids have come up with in the gaming tournament. They've modded Stellar Command to incorporate actual quantum mechanics. The Empire's former tactical AI is losing its mind trying to predict their moves. Jessica made her way to the command center, now transformed into a festival coordination hub. The screen showed celebrations spreading across former Imperial space. On some worlds, the festivals had been going on for months, each one spawning new forms of art and culture that would have been impossible under the old rigid hierarchy. You know what the best part is? She said to Aria as they watched the festivities. We didn't have to destroy anything to change everything. All we had to do was show them there were other ways to exist. Like a quantum particle showing that it can be in multiple states. Aria suggested. Exactly. We didn't defeat the Empire. We just collapsed its quantum state into something better. She paused as a new alert came in. Are those Mraxian cat videos? Indeed, Aria confirmed. They've become quite popular. Though I'm still not sure how they taught the tentacles to play with laser pointers. Jessica laughed, watching as her station, once prepared for war, now pulsed with the energy of creation and exchange. The transmission that had started it all hadn't been a weapon, it had been an invitation. An invitation to imagine different possibilities, to exist in multiple states, to embrace the uncertainty that made life worth living. And as she watched former Supreme Commander Zixtal's jazz quartet set up their instruments, their tentacles moving in impossible rhythms, through quantum probability spaces, she realized that sometimes the best way to change an empire wasn't through force at all. It was through teaching them how to dance.